Welcome back to the OPEX podcast. On today's episode, I speak with Dr. Jeoff Drobot about how to optimize health and performance in the 21st century. As always, guys, this was another excellent episode, and I hope you really enjoy it. Doc, thank you so much for making time today. I really appreciate it. How are you?
I'm great. It's hot. It's hot here, but I'm good.
It's funny you say it was hot because I was only talking to Kiva from OPEX yesterday in our Slack group, and she was telling me like it was over 100 degrees. Now that's obviously Fahrenheit, but I know that even in Celsius, that's very, very warm. And I was telling her, if my white Irish ass is over there, I'd be screwed.
Yeah, my Ukrainian ass is over here, and I'm Canadian. So people are like, well, why did you move down? It's going to be so hot. And I'm like, no. It's hot for 4 months, and it's really like quite nice for the other months. And they're like, well, you still must be hot. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm hot, but I jump in my pool as opposed to drive my car down the road sideways, like with my hat and gloves on. So I'll take it for those 4 months. As far as lifestyle goes, that's a good trade. I'll take it.
Yeah, big time. And just real quick before we get into our topic today, when I was living in Arizona, I was there for 3 months when I was interning at Altus, and I was there from November to February, and the weather was it was gorgeous for me, because it was like an Irish summer, So as I do with the air quotes, Arizona's winter. But when I was doing all the hiking, on Camelback and any of the trails I'd done at the weekends, I'd always saw the signs saying, between April and September, nobody is to hike without the following: hats, water, cell phone. And I was like, holy shit, it must get hot in the summer. Because literally I met people hiking, and I'm like, oh yeah, people die every year out hiking because they're idiots. And I was like, really? And they're just like yeah, it happens.
Like people on train going up to Everest, like there's a reason why nobody's outside. And when you're outside hiking in a mountain and you're driving to the mountain and there's nobody around, then that should be your first clue. Like, maybe I shouldn't, this is not my spot right now. Maybe I should regroup and come back. October, November sounds like everybody's. If I see people going up, then I'm okay. If I see nobody in the parking lot, then trust me, you're not the pioneer that first tracked that hiking trail. So
Wow.
Get back there. You won't find me doing that. I'm too scared and too smart, I guess.
Right. So topic for today is optimizing health, wellness, and performance in the 21st century. Now, before we get into this, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion, just for the listeners, Jeff, give us a bit about yourself and your background.
Okay. So my first degree was in exercise physiology, and that was a very long time ago. And then that was in the University of Calgary. So I went through exercise physiology, very interested in obviously human physiology first and then human performance second. And by the time I kind of graduated from exercise physiology, realized that, there was not a lot of either of those. So I said, what am I going to do now? I never had trouble in school. So I was just kind of floundering and had some scholarships to do conventional medical school. And they said, well, this is your spot right here. Like you obviously, you don't have an issue with this. You like medicine. And I was like, I don't know what medicine is. And then a couple of my professors who were actually medical doctors were like, this is not your jam here, conventional medicine, especially in Canada, because it was socialized medicine. So you were required to do a standard of care, which means, you would basically, it's heads in the beds. People would come in, you would get your script pad out, you would write. So even worse than exercise physiology was medicine. Exercise physiology, at least everybody just kind of looked at a VO2 max and was like, that's kind of cool. And then nobody was going to say how to improve it, but they were going to say, look at all the stuff we can measure. In medicine, we get out of the measurables and we're just like, none of the physiology matters if they come in with blood pressure problems and you just give them this high blood pressure. So that was not going to be my spot. I went then down to naturopathic medicine, really not knowing what it was, down to Portland, Oregon. But I went under the guise that I could do my athletic routine, but I'd also learn about diet and nutrition and vitamins and supplementation. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be good. Like this adds a layer onto what I was going to do. I'm still going to be a doctor, but I'm going to have some of this intel. And then when I got down there after my first 2 years, I realized, and this is no discredit to any organization, it's just like the whole goal is still the relief of symptoms, right? We're not really going into the machinery like I like to. I mean, my brain, I can memorize anything. So if it's just going to be high blood pressure and I can prescribe a medication or an herb, I'm not going to do that for the rest of my life either. So I started really exploring. This was before we could get wonderful things like podcasts, and I could go on YouTube and catch a million lectures from people that don't have any degrees or anything like that. I mean, but it was good knowledge. I had to order in tape courses from Europe and listen to lectures. And then I'd have to travel to Europe and go to places where, people were doing wonderful work, but nobody was listening in the field of technology. And then I really kind of I put that together with exercise physiology and human performance. And I started acquiring technology and machinery. And from there, I kind of set my deal on this is what I'm going to do. And it wasn't only applicable to athletes, but it was applicable to anybody with any kind of chronic disease, because you're trying to go from disease to whatever we call normal to above normal to performance. And everybody had a liver, everybody had adrenal glands, everybody had a thyroid. So it wasn't like I was speaking any different language. I was just saying, how do I get this part with a measurable to this piece, actually have the patient say, yeah, I feel good with what you and I were talking about before, without slugging down 30 pills, and actually get to the point where we're graduating physiology to a different level. And from there, I built a big place down in Arizona. I built another big clinic in Rhode Island. I built a project in the Bahamas, because there's people everywhere. So I just kind of take the model of using technology and using physiology, and then expanding on, what can we do with physiology to get performance? And then here I am talking to you. So that's the 5,000 foot view.
Appreciate it. Love that intro. Speak to me about biological medicine. So if I came into your office and said, what's biological medicine? What would you say to me?
Yeah, the best way that I can describe it. So conventional medicine is the management of symptoms in emergency medicine, which I personally I love. I work with lots of pro sports teams. So surgery is very necessary, right? That saves a lot of lives. Like, you come to me with impacted gallbladders, and I'm not going to give you a bunch of herbs because you're going to die. So we're going to say sometimes you have to remove the gallbladder and start over. And then we went into naturopathic medicine, which was more lifestyle stuff, which is all good. We'll say allopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine kind of fight. Then, like you were talking about, naturopathic medicine evolved into some more measurables called functional medicine, which is still based on laboratory examination of fit deficiencies. So they don't only look at the blood. And then biological medicine kind of, in my opinion, incorporates in dentistry, because medicine, we don't usually look at the mouth, right? We kind of forget that part of it, that it's a very important immune organ. So it incorporates that, and it incorporates a lot more physics. So functional medicine is a lot about biochemistry. And I wanted to get one more layer on that. And biological medicine might not have a great definition, but in my view, the reason why it has its own category is because it does apply technology and physics, where most other forms of medicine is mostly biochemistry. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm into. I think physics is a lot faster than biochemistry. And when we put them all together, we have something that nebulously is called biological medicine.
Brilliant. Yeah, you speak my language too, because I'm fairly fascinated with circadian biology, and I've been looking into a lot of areas around light and light therapies. Now, I do not proclaim to have any great knowledge of it currently, but I did interview a woman called Leanne Vignier on my own podcast, and she kept saying, she goes, medicine only goes as far as biochemistry, but they'll realize soon they have to go deeper. They have to go to physics. And then she's like, they even have to go deeper with physics. They'll have to get into the study of biophotons and how light really is affecting, the biochemistry. That, so there's like biophotons, and then the physics underpins the chemistry. Because again, the hierarchy of science, biology, which is underpinned by chemistry, which is underpinned by physics, and then what kind of brings all that together is mathematics, really, if you look at it too. So
yes, the quantum physics is what, if you're really smart, then you know quantum physics. If you're less smart, you know physics, and if you're less smart than that, you know biochemistry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can't do that. Biology is pretty good too. So we're going into that.
Sorry to all you biochemists out there. You've just been.
I'm not downplaying it. Hey, it is a very complex thing.
Oh yeah.
In my world, biochemistry works in a test tube. Biochemistry doesn't work that well in a body, because there's so many different biochemical reactions and so many influences. Biochemistry is kind of a reaction of things that you put in a test tube or a body, and then you're looking for the product. And it's not 1-to-1 equals 2. Sometimes it's 1-to-1 equals 500. And so it's an exact science when you can control variables. It's a very interesting science when you can't.
Yeah. Man, quantum mechanics, I'm just not ready yet. Where is the electron? We don't know. It's probably here. The probability clouds. So it's so funny.
It's
Um,
developing. It's
I know.
developing.
So again, I walk into your office, Jeff, and I say, "Here, Jeff, I want to be a savage. Tell me what to do." So how can you optimize my health and my performance? And when I say performance, really anything could be performance athletically, cognitively, just to be better performing parent, partner, friend, CEO of a company. Now I know obviously there could be different strategies there, but I just want you to take the mic and brain dump on that.
So the way I always approached it was, the body is one whole, but then we have to break it up into systems. And so I'll look at, we'll do an analytics, whatever that's going to be. I have a million different ways to do it, for nervous systems, lymphatic systems, digestive systems, central nervous systems, peripheral nerve. We're looking at all these things, cardiovascular systems, and I'm trying to figure out which of those systems is bogging down or going to be the anchor that's not going to allow me to get performance in the end. Everybody kind of says, well, if I add this and I should get performance. And the body doesn't really work like that. It's like if you add caffeine, it makes you go for a certain period of time, but then it has this refractory period where it's actually detrimental. We know that with training, right? If you overtrain, it's detrimental to your sport. So we're trying to get that secret sauce. And medicine was kind of made into a practice, which means I'm just going to guess. I'm going to try to guess. I'm going to practice medicine on you, and then you're going to come back in a month and tell me what you feel. And I never really was okay with that. So we have different assessment tools that we go ahead and we measure these systems, and some of it's biochemistry with blood work, and some of it's HRV, and some of it's, EEGs and neurofeedback studies. And I'm trying to figure out in that system, regardless of what you come in with the diagnosis. So whether you want to make the Olympics or whether you have Lyme disease, it doesn't really matter to me because those systems stay constant. I need to go ahead and measure those systems so that I can see what those systems look like. And then I will basically I will issue a priority to the system that I need to make function more. And it might not be the one that you think it is. You might come in with Crohn's disease and you expect me to deal with your small intestine. And I say, this is mostly in your central nervous system, and miraculously the autoimmune diseases will go away because we settle down, the noise or the irritation in the system. So I'll get all that done. We'll sit down, and a lot of this is virtually all over the world now because we can find devices and we can find technology, and we can find test kits, and you can do local blood work. And then people will basically have virtual conversations with me with some of the analytics. And again, that systems approach to biological medicine works pretty well. So we're not looking at symptoms, we're looking at pieces of it so I can get the result, or I can get the effect in the end. And then we'll set a program, and again, lifestyle's in it, some supplementation, some tech, some physics, training, nutrition, all that kind of stuff. And we'll say, this is what I think is going to move this big hole in the bucket to reduce this hole in the bucket. And like I said, miraculously, then all the metrics start moving. It's like looking at a company, and saying, well, we're just going to pour money into the area that does the best. And it's like, you can find a lot of CEOs that'll say, you have to look at the internal machinery and you really focus on the areas that are weak because they're pulling down the areas that are strong. The strong ones, they don't need any support. That's like, it's a 10% rule. You might get 10% more out of a right bicep, but that's not going to really get you much more if you have, weak stabilizer. It's not going to take you to where you need. You can get this summation where you're saying, if I go ahead and attack the weakest systems, which is a big arena, and I can make that thing a lot better, then I will get this much more progress in all of these different systems. And you're bringing up circadian rhythm, right? So if somebody's circadian, for example, if somebody's doing the night shift, how many different things does that affect? Because somebody would just say it affects hormones. And I'm like, it affects a lot more systems than hormones. So if we were just going to give you hormones and you couldn't still adapt to that night shift, we're going to have a breakdown in the immune system. We're going to have a breakdown in the digestive system. So I always find metrics to say some people are born to do night shifts. They have a great nervous system. They have a great hormonal system. Some people can't. So when we're looking at it, we're just saying, where is the biggest hole in the bucket? It's not typical medicine because it's not based on a symptom. I'm looking at a system, not a symptom. And I'm saying, I need to go ahead and attack the system. And then the symptoms are irrelevant because they will sort themselves out when I go ahead and make these parts strong.
Could you go into a little more detail about if you can, the assessment you utilize for each one of the systems. So like how many systems do you look at?
Well, depending on, again, when the person comes in, I will have an idea of what I want to do. So whether we talked about comprehensive digestive stool analysis. So there's some outside tests I'll do, vitamin mineral analysis, maybe some food sensitivity testing, because I'm looking to make it as efficient as I can. I'm not looking to make it the smallest box that everybody's in with the most amount of supplements. I'm saying, let me look at physiology as it stands right now. And granted, it can change, right? Granted, it'll change. So they'll come in, we'll do basically EEG studies, we'll do heart rate variability studies, we'll do full body thermographies, we'll do a bunch of energetic testing on organ systems, we'll do a whole bunch of organ systems or organ testing, and especially in my East Coast facility, we'll do a whole dental exam, and then we'll put all of these pieces of paper down, or I'll look at all these pieces of paper, and we'll run through with the patient, and we'll say, look at all of this workup that we did. And again, it's a little bit different because I'm not looking at disease, I'm looking at functionality that leads to disease. And I'll say, here's what we got. And it's very clear when you have technology that we do not use in medicine, by the way. We do not like to use it in medicine because we don't have enough time, or maybe we don't have enough knowledge. But when you have all those metrics and all the machinery to do it, it gives you a very complete picture of what's going on in the body. It's like, I always am amazed because I took my truck in the other day to the mechanic, and I don't even know if he looks under my hood anymore. He just hooks this stuff up to a whole bunch of cords, and he listens to what I say, and then he goes and he just does all these analytics, and he comes back and says, that's your problem, and then he fixes it. And I'm like, why can't we just, there's a point to listening in medicine, which I get. I can say my car's clicking, but after that, he's not practicing on my truck. He's getting a pretty educated guess, and it usually is right most of the time. Why in medicine do we never look under the hood? We never hook anybody up to anything. We're just put some different gas in it and see how it goes. It's I'll tell you how it goes. It's not going to go great. And I always just wondered, when I'm looking at all these other industries and I'm saying, how did those guys evolve to limiting the amount of guesswork? And in medicine, we're still practicing medicine. It's very frustrating to the patient, because you know what the patient's doing? Researching. You know what somebody's interested in performance are doing? Researching. And then you go to, your medical professional, which I have a bunch of doctors as patients, and it's not their fault, or it is. And it's you don't even remember the basic physiology of what a circadian rhythm is, let alone Ambien is not going to fix it. That's not what we're talking about here. So it's symptom management, and it's curious how these other industries can evolve so rapidly with technology, and in medicine, we're still sitting here using Tylenol. I'm still dumbfounded by it, but it is what it is, right?
You mentioned you'd like to test for micronutrients deficiencies there, and also food sensitivities, and I'm very interested to ask, your thoughts on that, because I hear so many other professionals in the field saying, they're not worth it because they'll give you these standard sort of what's high and low, and how do you know what's high for someone and what's low for someone in terms of their physiology, so what's high calcium for me versus low calcium for you. And then also in regards to food sensitivities, they're I've heard people they get two kits and they draw the same blood and they send it off, but one with different name, and they get two different results and it was the same blood. So they're saying that this can't be right either. So what are your thoughts on micronutrient testing and food sensitivities in terms of their work?
So you got to remember what they're testing. They're testing an ever-changing immune system, and whether you're using ALCAT tests for cytotoxic reactions, or whether you're using IgG tests or IgE and IgA tests, they're always going to be testing a different thing. That's why you have to kind of know, what are you testing? And I can cheat, because I'll be able to see on the physiology part of it with the thermography, what is the state of the small intestine? So if the small intestine is cold, or if the lymphatics are hot, then I won't even go do a food sensitivity test, because I know every single food is going to come up there is going to be a problem. We sometimes have to have a clear idea to be able to say, we'll test this stuff and we'll actually get some kind of a decent clinical piece of information for it. If it's not worth it, it's if I'm going to get a sprained right ankle and I'm going to say, let's do a movement test. Yeah, going forward hurts. Yeah, going backwards hurts. Yeah, left hurts, right test. It's well, shit. What am I doing that for? Like, why did I waste that $300 to do the movement test? Why don't I fix the ankle, right? And then I'll find the appropriate time to do the test. And you know, and again, not to bash on anything, but you know, there's these systems of medicine where the first thing you do before you even talk to the person is send out 50,000 tests, and then you get all these metrics back, and you don't know how to read them, and you're just basically clunking these pieces together. And there's no system to it. You know, you have no hierarchy to it. It's like, you're low in vitamin B3, take vitamin B3. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, if they're low in all these B vitamins, I use micronutrient testing to show me trends. I don't necessarily use micronutrient testing to show me a value that I'm then going to try to go ahead and jam this thing in, because I know it's like a seesaw. Every time I put more weight on, I'll set something else up, because, you know, it's a lot like looking at, you know, evaluating the stock market. Like, you can't jump on every piece of data. Like, you're supposed to be able to stand back from it. You get paid to stand back from it and do the analytics on it. And it's not all black and white analytics. There's a lot of art still that should be used in medicine. It's not all science. You're still supposed to use art, right? That's experience. But you see, you know, vast trends in mineral. You see vast trends in antioxidants. You know, you see if the immune system is even reacting to it. You get to see if white blood cells are even accumulating these nutrients. If they're not, where are they going? Is the person not eating them, or are they being used in another area? It's not simply like, I'm going to jam these pills in here, because you have to figure out, like, if this person tells me what they're telling me and all these values are low, I can't imagine that they're sensitive to every single one of those foods, right? They weren't in their past. So forget about food, focus on the immune system, and say, do this anti-inflammatory diet while I build back the small intestine. The first test is never the important test. The second test is, right? It always has been. You know, everybody wants to go ahead and do these big, elaborate programs on the first test, but sometimes don't act on the first test, because you take the patient down these roads of massive antibiotics or massive supplementation, and you just haven't corrected the imbalance that existed before, and then you end up into like a real rat's nest. And so it's always going to be controversial if you don't know how to use the information, because everything is. You know, everything will be controversial if you have too much information and you don't know how to assess it.
Tell me this: do you kind of have like a standard, like, basic lifestyle guidelines that you like everyone to do first before you really start to delve in deeper with any investigation? Or will you always, like, not so much interview, but will you always obviously take in your patient, listen to them, and always still think, I still want to run this test based on what I'm seeing and hearing here, you know, being very selective? Or will you always, like, do you kind of like have like a standard competency? Listen, before you do anything, I want you to, like, you know, nail down sleep and hydration, and just clean up the diet a bit and see how you feel then. And then if there's still a bit of issues, then we'll go into our deeper investigation.
Well, the difference in my practice is most of it is referral from somebody else. So it's not like I haven't seen a sore throat for like 15 years. Like, nobody walks in and just is like, hey, here's a sore throat. So most of them,
you're seeing pretty screwed up people at this stage,
or people that want real performance or not to be screwed up.
Okay.
You know, I'll call these high level. I don't call them chronic disease. I'll say these are kind of high level cases where they may have seen 3 or 4 or 5 people, or they have, you know, a couple trainers that are like, look, I'm just not getting what I think I'm getting out of doing what you just mentioned, right? Like, this basic stuff plus a little bit of this advanced stuff should work, but it's not working for these people. So what is the problem? And then, you know, the goal is not to write over somebody's program, but to say, you were close, you know, you were 10% off with this person, but that 10% inhibited everything that you were trying to do. Because as practitioners or coaches, you know, we're always going to say, I'm going to add something to you as an investment. Like, whether it's training is an investment, and the training program is useless unless I get a response to the training program, right? Like, there's no sense. There's no money in that, because I know I'm going to put the body through stress, hopefully in a good way, to get a better result off of this, so that the person keeps coming back and they keep attaining goals. And medicine's a little like that. You know, I got to make a leap. It'd be nice if everybody, we have a book called The Basic Treatment Guidelines, which is dry skin brushing and probiotics and anti-inflammatory diets and hydration. And you're just trying to set the table up so that you can at least limit some of the, you know, we'll say external factors that would allow you to have maybe some simplicity. But at the end of the day, most of my patients or most of my athletes, something has been going ride for a little longer than like a week. And so we'll get into it at a much higher level to say, you want to live to be 120? Fix this. And then that's worth putting the effort in, because people get tired and the body gets, the body accommodates pretty quickly to just like a multivitamin over time. So we want to focus on always taking systems and saying, if we want to get to this level, or we want to get out of this autoimmune process, or we want to go ahead and win this medal, or we want to go ahead and get our next contract, really what do we need to do to make sure that we're going to attain that?
So my next few questions, they might sound rudimentary, but I just want to kind of keep it like in a context for listeners. I just go into your office and I say, Doc, tell me what your thoughts on nutrition. How would you approach that?
So everybody is individual and basic at the same time. And when we look at it and we say, my big thing with nutrition is and from what I see, I still like loading and unloading. People will say, what does that mean? And I'll say, biologically, because I like circadian rhythms. I like rhythms in the body, and the body responds to rhythms just like the body responds to seasons. We know this. Kids grow in the spring, they hibernate, and we know this. This isn't a big thing anymore, and everybody has diluted nutrition down to like a practice. I'm going to practice keto. I'm going to practice paleo. And if I'm going to practice paleo, I'm going to do it for 365 days. And I'm like, well, you should take the research one step further past that and understand that like that has never been tried, because everybody like, oh, this is a caveman diet. And it's like, well, I don't know how many cavemen we need to interview to realize like they didn't eat like that every single day. Like that just wasn't available. So these proteins were loaded at some period of time, and then they were unloaded. And that way we unload lymphatic systems and we give digestive systems rest. And we have certain nutrients at these times and these times. So dietarily, I always say, and I'll always go and say, what have you been doing for the last 6 months? Let's spend 3 weeks on doing something different. And it's not like eating Big Macs. I'm not saying that. But let's cause some kind of shift so that we can get your body to react, because nobody's bodies react anymore. There's so much stress. There's so many chemicals in the environment that the body is just kind of shocked into one position, which is survival, basically, with the sympathetic nervous system. And it just does everything it needs to do for survival. And it never comes out of there to a point where it can go ahead and clean up from whatever we had just put it through. And because everybody comes in with some diet, right? Whether they're a vegan, whether they're doing keto, or whether there's no gluten. And I'm like, there's some real problem foods when we genetically modify them. But at the whole, it's like diets are programs, and programs are inputs. And you need to change the input during the year so that you unload it. If you do bicep curls every single day of your life, trust me, you will not be happy after a year. That bicep will never have a chance. If you do the most aggressive to failure bicep curls, you'll look at the end of 365 days and you'll be like, man, that thing is screwed up right now, right? The only thing then I have is to rest it. And some of these diet trends or fads, it's like you're just jamming this thing in. And first of all, you're Irish, I'm Ukrainian. Like, I've never seen a banana. Like, so I'm just going to do these weird diets and focus on organic bananas for fat. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I think everybody made diet so complex that it became a religion more than it became anything more than what it was supposed to do, which is just fueling. And at certain times you're supposed to have fuel, and at certain times you're supposed to rest it and recycle those fuel sources that you build up. And we know this stuff, and it seems very rudimentary, but diet is, like I said, such a religion to people that, I mean, it's just so fascinating to me that it's like you're gonna go ahead and go down with that ship, thinking that was the best thing you ever did, and then somebody will be like, "I'm on a clean diet," and I come in and I have 50 food sensitivities. It's like, well, what are we gonna eat here? Like we basically have a Brussels sprout that isn't on this list. You got no protein sources. Unload these systems, and then let's go ahead and redo it. So when people come in, and usually the diet that they're doing is going to be hopefully clean. If not, I'll clean it up, and then we'll try to find some individualization to the diet, and then we'll flux this diet.
Yeah, it's funny. It's exactly the same conversation I used to teach at a personal training college, and I used to have the same conversation with nutrition. I used to use the example of training. I was like, if I gave you the same training program for the rest of your life, what would you guys think? Like, oh, it would stop working, diminishing returns, like law of accommodation. And I was like, what is law of accommodation? Like, the same stimulus to the organism, it diminishes its diminishing return. What's the actual the quote from Zassioff and Kramer? The organism decreases its biological stimulus to the same stimulus or something like that. I'll find it later. But anyway, yeah, it's like, law of accommodation, diminished return, or adaptive resistance. And I was like, it's the exact same with nutrition. It's an input to the system, like training's an input. And if you keep giving it the same input, it just accommodates to it. And I think a part of that too, interesting at your thoughts too, Jeff, is like, it's because we lack variation though, in the modern world. I mean, we basically live in perpetual summer. We have lighted homes, we have central heating, and we 24/7, and you've got global transports of foods that are not meant to be in your locality at all. So you can be eating foods that are like completely, not only do they not grow in your country at all, but like they're like, so like a banana in Ireland at any time, even in the summer, is still like a mismatch, genetically really to people, because it's never really happened before until like the last 150 years or whatever. But again, you've heated homes, light 24/7, foods available that really shouldn't be available. And like, we're not really asking ourselves, like, what's the biological cost here of all of this?
Well, we can figure it out because we can see that, over the last 15 years, even, we can see chronic disease and people are just, we're withering, and I'm a big, I love nature. I love nature shows. So I'll have patients that like have very expensive like breeding programs of horses and dogs. And they'll always tell you the same thing. There's a lineage here that is my investment. If I go ahead and feed this dog or this animal or this fish this superfood that they've never seen before, I probably will cripple their genetics in some way. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting because we don't do that, right? Like, if we have breeding programs, like why aren't we looking at that saying, if I'm Ukrainian and my partner's something else, like, why can't we figure out what we're really supposed to eat? And then, because that seemed to have worked for a long time, right? We got to me and you are sitting here, not because organic bananas came into Ireland, but because we're sitting here saying our body's kind of figured out physiologically how that's going to work. Why can't we just go back to simplicity? And it's impossible because, again, we have so much variation and we have so much opportunity to do all these things. And human nature will always say, I'm going to do what I like to do, right? If I want to stay up till midnight, I'm going to do it, right? And the moon just used to say, you're not going to do anything, right? We used to obey, I guess, the laws of nature a little bit. And now we're like, hey, if I want to go ahead and do a workout at 3 o'clock in the morning, 24-hour fitness is open. I'll just go crush this thing. It's like, I don't know if that was really supposed to happen. I'm glad that you fit it on your balance sheet for the day, but it's not going to get the results. And we're seeing in health, like, as we make it more complex, especially with technology, and everybody hates, electromagnetic fields and the ability for radio. Everybody hates that discussion because they're like, I don't want to talk about that because right now we're using technology to have the podcast, but it's a human experiment. We know it's not going well. Like, we can figure that out, right? We're okay. We're just trying to say, why can't we ever just limit it into what it was designed to do? Why do we always have to go to the excess of it? And physiology just hasn't evolved into that 2.0 where it can handle all this input. And it's we'll learn that lesson as we're seeing it in infertility rates for sure, that it's not working out. Right, the infertility business is thriving as we figure out, like, geez, reproduction is an absolute luxury, and our bodies just don't seem to want to do that anymore. So something in the environment must be a problem if we can't even produce sperm and procreate. Like, something is happening. Our bodies are saying this is not a safe environment, and then we'll go to a doctor and spend tens of thousands of dollars to try to force the issue, and sometimes it works, and oftentimes it doesn't.
Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, and actually, I have the quote here in front of me because that was driving me nuts. When I forget something, I'm like, I feel like my brain's getting old. So for Zassioff and Kramer, they say the law of accommodation: the response of a biological object to a constant stimulus decreases over time. That's their quote. That's their quote from the Science and Practice Strength Training. And what I always used to try and express to the students I used to teach was, that's not just a law for training. That's like a biological law across.
That's physiology.
That's physiology across every domain. I was like, that's nutrition, that's medicine. Like, if you keep taking, like, it's like caffeine. It's like, or like alcoholics. It's like they have to drink more and more to get the same response because they're starting to adapt to it.
Yeah, you're always chasing the first response.
Yeah.
And that's like, training is a little bit the same. Like everybody gets the first benefits in the first month and they're like, I'm going to kill it. And then there comes a plateau. And
Yeah.
it's like the plateau is always what kills a coaching business, because you're like, well, I've got one choice here, or two choices. I'm going to reduce calorie and I'm going to increase volume. And then I'm going all in on that. And then you stunt the person's metabolism and they're sore and they're not getting the results. And it's devastating, you know, when you're talking to people and you're like, wow, you and that person have really got a great relationship and you are putting all the right things in. It's just not reacting the way that it's supposed to, because the body is not only accommodated, but now it's resisting. And accommodation is at least zero net. And resistance is like, wow, we're going in the wrong direction. And then poop, we look at the metrics, you know, after 6 months or a year of doing this, and it's like, wow, that person has really zero anabolic hormone to do anything that you're doing. So now I have to tell you, both of you, let's revert, don't scrap it. Let's build these things back up, and we'll come out of the gates and we've learned something about this person's physiology, and then we're back on a road that we're not going to make the same mistake twice, which is empowering to everybody.
So as I said before, we've just got the hour here, and I really want to get your thoughts on some other topics. So two areas I really want to get your thoughts on are a big thing lately in the research field in terms of nutrition and circadian biology and health is this idea of meal timing and peripheral circadian regulators. You know, a lot of with Sash and Panda's work, and, you know, a lot of the stuff around intermittent fasting, and this idea, you know, they're starting to discover that when you eat the meals later in the day, it's not as good for you if you eat them earlier in the day, because of the way, like, you know, the metabolic machinery is set up that, you know, there's this hypothesis coming out that ideally we're more metabolically wired to take in our nutrients during daylight hours and not so much towards like nighttime and bedtime, when really the gut should be, you know, we should be fasting, the gut should be healing. And then there's all these benefits, you know, of intermittent fasting. But then people say, well, they're on rats. Can we infer how much of that is applicable to humans, and blah, 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 blah. So two questions I'd like you to cover, obviously one at a time. I want to get your thoughts on how to optimize kind of circadian biology and health. And within that piece, what are your thoughts on this idea of not only what we eat, but when we eat it? So these peripheral circadian regulators in terms of meal timing. And then when we get to that, I'd love to wrap up with your thoughts on microbiome research. But first of all, circadian biology, and what are your thoughts with this research all around like meal timing?
Well, we still know, you know, if we look at we'll say longevity studies, we still know that the person that eats the least amount of calories seems to live the longest, because they spend the least amount of metabolic energy, right? It's like the king of the jungle that lies down for the longest and has the nutrition that they need to. I mean, their metabolic nutrition or their metabolic energy is used somewhere else.
Jeff, sorry, before you go on, do we know why that is? Because I think the old hypothesis, or no, I'm not saying old, but was the original hypothesis, it's less oxidative stress being happened. But now people are saying, well, oxidative
less
stress,
metabolic energy and less oxidative stress, and really when you're not processing something, you're repairing something else. You know, like when you take in food, it's an immediate strain. Like if me and you crushed up broccoli and put it into an IV and injected it into our arms, we're in trouble fast. Right? That's why we have 60 to 80% of this immune system in this digestive tract, because food is the most foreign thing we're supposed to ever be exposed to in a day. You know, and again, this goes back, like it doesn't, now we have cadmium and lead and a whole bunch of plastics, but man-made chemicals. But really the reason why we have this wonderful immune system with this microbiome in this digestive tract is because if things get by those guards at the gate, like we're done fast, you know, as a caveman, we're gone. So we have all this stuff in here, this massive amount of processing, a massive amount of immune investment that goes into just breaking down food. Because at the end of the day, we're just trying to get proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, right? Some nutrients, vitamins. We really can tie up that digestive tract, which takes us into this intermittent fasting piece, which was done wrong. You know, and only done wrong in North America. Breakfast just means the first meal of the day. Like I hear in intermittent fasting, we're like, well, we just skip breakfast. It's like, no, breakfast means you break the fast. It means if you eat that first meal of the day at lunch, it's still breakfast. It's not based on that. It's based on your first meal whenever you want that first meal. And hormonally and for your nervous system, we're supposed to have, you know, these metabolic parts that are active earlier in the day, because food takes hours to get through the digestive tract. and you want that muscle at its best, and you want your thyroid hormone at its best when you have the highest density of work, right? That makes sense. You got the most workers there, you have the most work, you're going to get the best return from that work. So in North America, I'd say we got into this intermittent fasting, which got into less physiology and more social. If I skip breakfast, I'm not going to eat it with my family. So that's an easy one. I'm just going to go ahead and then backload my meals, and I'll miss all of this. I'll eat at 8 and I won't eat again till 1 o'clock. And it's like, wow, you have cortisol that's coming up early in the morning at 6. It's expecting something to offset it at least. Then we got thyroid hormone that's going to come up, and it's got to be highest at 2. We've got no logs on the fire here, and socially, just because we wanted to eat dinner with our family, we backloaded that. And we know that the liver is most active from 9 to 11, and it takes 4 hours for protein to get through a stomach. So it was never supposed to be done like that. And you can imagine, in physiology, like we woke up in the morning and we were just going to go fuel for the day. And so our parts took that and they learned that. And they say, if I'm going to have these hormones with testosterone and everything else high, I'm going to want to have this workload. I've got these workers waiting for it. I should supplement at this time. And then we're supposed to rest it after 3. And that's when intermittent fasting works. By the way, you need to get to, people are like, oh, it triggers natural killer cell activities. And it's like, no, that's fasting for 3 days does that. Intermittent fasting doesn't do that. Intermittent fasting has said, well, it adds longevity. No. It's less calorie and less work, but it doesn't do that to your immune system. And if we don't get the timing right, we really throw out that circadian rhythm, because your body, it's like the night shift, right? It's totally, you can do it, but we know that it's not internally what the body is supposed to be doing. So I would always bring it back to saying, if you're going to do it, you have to load in the morning and you have to rest in the evening, because that's what physiology defines you as having to do.
If in case Peter T is listening, I think really the question, or how I should have phrased it, should have been time restricted feeding, because apparently intermittent fasting and time restricted feeding are two different things now. So
everything's got an evolution of something with a different name, but it just means like, when are you plugging your face and when are you not?
I know, yeah. Well, to me, like if you'd asked me what's intermittent fasting, I would have said you're still taking in the same amount of energy. You're taking it in within a time restricted window. I would have thought they were the same thing, but apparently he's saying they're not. But I didn't investigate that anymore. But you brought up something there as you were speaking, and I just wanted to mention here was, I think the reason why a lot of people backload when they intermittent fast is purely just down to socializing and yeah. Like, but if you think about it too, Jeff, I definitely know in Ireland anyway, in terms of like how we grow up, like as we play sports, like all of our sports are in the evening. In terms of like our training's all like at 6-7 p.m. So it's like, oh, we'll have dinner after training, because no one, and then see you're in school too, so you couldn't get like a dinner at 1 p.m. You had your sandwich and something small, and then you wouldn't have anything big before you go training. Then you get home like at 4 p.m. and you're like, well, I'm not gonna have dinner now, and I'm gonna be like doing a hard training session in 2.5 hours time or 3 hours, so I'll have something small now. And you get home then at like 8:30 and you're ravenous. So it's just people got into the habit of having their dinner. But it's so funny you mention that, because I remember then, see, I live in Dublin in the city, so that was kind of like my life growing up, that dinner was always like your meal at night, kind of, you know what I mean? But when I used to go down to my grandparents down in the country of Ireland, completely different. They get up, right, have a little bit of something in the morning, eggs or porridge, but then dinner was always 1 p.m. And if I thought about it too, I was like, well, think about my grandfather. Like, he was working, that was his work time, and he'd come in at 1 p.m. ravagely hungry, have his big meal at 1, go out, work like a dog then till 6, and then it was supper at 6. And supper was just like a little bit of tea and a little bit of brown bread, home bread. And
very used to the night. That's it. And there's a lot of cultures that still do that. The biggest meal should be from 1 to 3 p.m. because that's when your body temperature should be the highest, so that you have this metabolic energy that you're going to put in your biggest investment. You're going to get the maximum out of it. And we used to make that used to be a habit, of having that, where you ate dinners early and you had all this food, and then maybe we got into a little bit of snacking after you got back from your stuff, but it turned into socially because we just put a schedule on top of an eating, program, And those two things are different in my aspect. I mean, it's like, we shouldn't be taking in this massive load at 6, 7 o'clock at night when it doesn't even get through the digestive process to have any chance of being some kind of food without fermenting or putrefying. And then we go to bed, you know, and again, I get it. Like training, you get home, you're from the gym, you did a good thing, you get home at 7, you go ahead and pack a steak in there. And then because you're just so hooked on circadian rhythm, you go to bed at 9. Yeah. And it's like, wow, that is like, you just did something interesting to your immune system for the next 48 hours, right? The food is, it's not like you can take that back. It's got a cumulative effect.
But then if you do look at cultures like Greece and Italy, I remember I lived with a guy from Italy. They also have their biggest meal to it very late at night though. And again, it's a social thing, like, but I remember asking if...
They go to bed till late and they don't wake up till late.
Yeah.
Like cultures have figured this stuff out. Right? Like they don't pop awake at 5 o'clock, jam a cup of coffee and go to work for 13 hours. Like everybody understands there's checks and balances. And you can do that. I'm not going to say when we're looking at, you know, the study of those cultures, again, if you go back a couple generations, you realize that they might do that once a week on family day, but they don't generally make a practice of doing that. Yeah. You know, when we look at farmers and stuff like that, you know, people that worked, I mean, they didn't stay up drinking till midnight because work was done in the morning. And again, that was a little bit more of a recent addition, I'll say.
But I think that there's some mitigating factors to that. So even if you were eating like the main amount of your calories late in the evening, which we've said now that's not ideal given the way human physiology is set up. Like there's other things, confounding factors we're not taking there in those cultures. So like France or Italy or Greece, one, they usually don't eat a lot actually during the day. So like, do you know what I mean? They're probably, you know, so they're going into that meal pretty fast. So the machinery probably still is a little bit upregulated, which helps. But then in the environment that they eat that in, they're relaxed, they're calm.
It's 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's 3 hours.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Like it takes them hours to get, so they're chewing that meal because they're talking and all that. So, like, again, if you're an athlete and you're training late in the evening, as I was saying to you, and you're getting home late and having your dinner and all this, see, this is a discussion that, and you'd be well wise to this because me and James have this all the time, is like, that is appropriate for what you're hoping to achieve as an athlete, but it's not healthy. And this gets into that discussion that, listen, we know that sport and health are on different ends of the spectrum. We've had this conversation so many times. So like you're doing something abnormal. Like no time in evolution where the cavemen out going, yeah, we got to go like to the scrimmage at 7 p.m. tonight, you know what I mean? And or under artificial light shooting hoops. Is like that didn't happen. So like sport is a complete novelty and it's not healthy. You know, if you're talking about like optimal health and longevity, it's not healthy. So like this whole thing of like, because then I get athletes going, well, should I not like eat at all after I train? It's like, no, you are going to need to get some fuel into you because performance is your thing. But just so you know, this is not leading to vitality, as James would say.
Right. And then that's when I bring it back and say, you're going to do this for a period of time. And then you're going to have this 2 or 3 week rest cycle where you're going to not do any protein because you got to unload all this stuff that wasn't metabolized that got stored in lymphatic systems. Like we can't just jam this thing in. You know, the continuum kind of goes, we do play and then we do fitness and then we do sport and then we do something I'll call sacrificial sport, which everybody's like, that's a bad word. I'm like, no. It's not a bad word. It actually is a very noble term.
Yeah.
You know, that you're going to sacrifice something to get something else. That's okay, but you have to realize that at that level, it turns into sacrificial sport, which means you've got to do things that go against the law of physiology that will get you one return in the short term, but it'll harm you in the long term. And as long as everybody knows that, I think that's great. Yeah. You know, I think we are supposed to do that.
There's no judgment, as James would say. Once you are aware of the trade-off, you know, there's no judgment.
Mentally get there and then don't do it blindly so that you're doing things to understand that I need to do things to maximize the ability for myself to do this sacrificial sport, as well as I need to spend a little bit of time in the day to offset the damage that I'm doing. Yeah. That's a discipline. Beautiful. You know, people are like, oh, I'm just going to do pro bodybuilding. I'm like, you know what? You're going to screw the crap out of yourself, but we're going to go get that t-shirt and we're going to get some pictures. Yeah. We're going to look real good. I'm just going to explain that we'll map this process while you're doing it so that we can get out of that process with that life event, which ended up to be a goal. But at that point, like I said, you were sacrificing physiology to get sport, and that's okay, right? People were doing that for a long period of time, but then they stop, and now we have the ability to look at that and say we understand the physiological process won't exactly equal. Like, we can't find a whole bunch of ultra marathoners that were like, hey, how'd that go for you 40 years later? It's like, no, that probably isn't a good marketing tool to get into that. But if we would have looked at it while we were doing it, that's what I'm saying, virtual consultations and doing that kind of stuff, if we would have looked at that and said, let's just term these sacrificial sports. That's okay, right?
That's beautiful.
We can do that, and let's have that word to say, let's go ahead and make sure that we're not sacrificing too much to get this goal, even though I love it, because I think that's human nature. Let's do these behind the scene things to make sure that we're not doing too much damage.
Yeah, man, I could talk to you at length about this, but I love that term. I love that term, sacrificial sports. I really do. I think that's a great kind of phrase to put all that discussion into. Before you go, Jeff, I know you've only like 5 minutes there. Give me your just immediate thoughts about microbiome, because that's the other big area of research that's coming out now, and people are saying it's linked to everything, depression, and they're talking about fecal matter transplants, and again, it's all done with rats, and how much can we infer? But give me your little bit of brain dump on microbiome.
So that the small intestine is probably, if I could say, there's, besides the lymphatic system, which doesn't get understood, I would say that the small intestine is probably the most important organ to health that we have.
Wow. Yeah.
We have, a numerous amount of bacteria, and people kind of get it mixed up, but that microbiome is very transient. Like, stress really changes it. Diet really changes it. Supplementation changes it. But again, it's a transient environment, and it outnumbers our cells. So that's what we got, right? And it's just one of these things that we have little glands in there, little organs in there called Peyer's patches, which are never talked about in medicine, which are an interesting thing. And the bacteria is there to provide an influence to the rest of your body. And the Peyer's patches, which are supposed to be lined in the small intestine, which are kind of like thymuses these days. Everybody looks at it and they're like, nobody's got a thymus anymore. It's like, well, that's a problem, right? Because that's a major immune organ.
Yeah.
We have a lot of research around microbiomes, understanding that there's hundreds of species in there, and they all have to be in a balance. And probiotics, are a way to transiently affect the balance, but it comes back to lifestyle. If we're chronically stressed all the time, that's an environment, and it'll change, and it's a wonderful thing. That is supposed to be the first order of defense to change if the environment changes. If we're stressed, we're going to form more fermentative bacteria. We now know that the microbiome doesn't only exist in the gut. There's wonderful research that says it exists in the brain. It exists everywhere. And those bacteria, they are the ones that are going to call the shots. They're going to take in all of the environment, and they're going to determine, who do I have to put out on the field to match the environment? And then we're going to get the result of whatever those guys produce. People say, well, Candida is bad. It's like, Candida holds like 60 times its weight in mercury. It's very, very, it's like pond scum. It's very, very necessary for a toxic environment. If you don't have it, you will not enjoy the response to that. E. coli is the same way. When we do parasitology testing, it's like everybody has some parasites. The goal is you're supposed to have a clean stool test, normal bacteria. That's supposed to be fluxing all the same, every single time. And when the bacterial culture is wrong, it's not wrong because it's wrong. It's wrong because it adapted to the environment not being the greatest to have the garden that it should be. And for us, again, we kind of dumb it down into supplementation, which I just hate, right? Like, we're going past, like, we have this huge organ, and we're saying if we put in these billions of bacteria, we're going to influence the environment, and we do to a certain amount. But it's not going to globally change what that environment is reacting to. That environment has reacted. It doesn't just decide to go off and cause an autoimmune process. It has changed to adapt and saying survival from a day to day. This is what I need to do. So I'm going to build these guys here that all have their job to do, minus like Clostridium or something that you're exogenously getting. Every single one of those bacteria in the balance that they're there for a reason, because we created that imbalance.
Yeah.
And that imbalance was necessary for survival, not great for longevity, but necessary for that survival, that organism at that particular time. And so when we go ahead and we speak on the microbiome, we have to understand that it's not static in nature. It's constantly changing. And you can do far more through lifestyle and dietary, we'll say addition and subtraction than we can with supplementation, because we know it's transient. So it's always it's one of those things where I'm saying it is by far, with the lymphatic system, the most important immune and metabolic and nervous system. We have our own nervous system in that digestive tract called the enteric nervous system, which nobody ever wants to talk about.
The second brain.
The second brain. And it's really going to determine what you're doing or not doing. And it's very primitive. It's very influenced by any kind of external environment changes, and it's beautiful at the same time. So I don't think, I wish we just didn't study it and just study it as far as supplements are concerned. I wish we didn't do that. I wish we just said, this is what it is. This is what it looks like with people are under stress. This is what it looks like when we don't sleep, because we do all this with heart rate variability now, right? We're like, we can measure peripheral nervous system, so we'll never take that in a snapshot in time, because I can't give you a pill of parasympathetic nervous system activity, right? I can't just give you that in a pill and say, look, I'm changing all the metrics. And with probiotics, I think it's wonderful that we have put this microscope on it and said, look at these guys. And then we're like, look at these guys that aren't great. And then we're like, I know diet makes it not great and stress makes it not great, but why can't we talk about why it changed to be what it is now, instead of saying, take some pills and make it different? It's like, oh, I don't know. That's a clever marketing ruse. But again, it helps, but it doesn't fix. And fixing doesn't lead you to performance and longevity. Fixing gets you out of survival. And I'm okay with that, to a certain extent, but you're supposed to fix it, band-aid it, till you actually go ahead and influence or change the environment. And so it self-propagates by itself, which is the way that it's supposed to be. We have no studies, by the way, on what happens when I ingest 1 billion lactobacillus acidophilus every single day. What am I doing they're all competitive. We always, in the world of supplementation or naturopathic medicine or whatever we want to call it these days, alternative medicine, we're always like, take these magic beans and I promise you the beanstalk will grow. And it's like, I don't know if I don't see that's happening. That's the art part of it that we're missing. The science is good, but the art part of it, I don't know. Jury's out.
And what's the situation with I constantly hear this argument that probiotics, empty stomach or have to be food cause of hydrochloric acid in the stomach. What's the story of that?
So again, that's a great story, because it leads us to either selling you more stuff with an enteric coated capsule, or just being like, okay, so when you eat dirt, you usually ate dirt with some food attached to it. Yeah. I don't know a lot of people besides cats that'll just go gnaw on some grass for a little while to see how that tastes. The stomach, Lactobacillus acidophilus, for example, means acid-loving bacteria, right? So if we named it that way, then why are we so scared of putting it through stomach acid? It's kind of, some of these things were supposed to be degraded with acid, to have another effect that we just kind of forget. We just kind of look at these things and say, well, if I need to get all these bacteria to this environment and I'm going to put this enteric coated capsule, I'm like, I don't know if that's ever been tried again in human physiology, that we just had these bacteria slip through this cloak called the Trojan horse and land in the small intestine and say, here we are, billions fold. Well, all we're going to do is do good stuff. And that's why we're really starting to see that pushback, which is like, no, you only do prebiotics. No, you do probiotics. You got to do an empty stomach. No, take before you go to bed. And then it's like biodynamic farming. It's like, look, you just do it. You do it for periods of time. Then you rest it. Then you do another species. And there was a lot of good work, on pleomorphic changes in bacteria that nobody wants to talk about, because it was looked at this taboo thing. And it was really it's an ecology. It's a huge study that I think we're just trying to narrow it down and putting like license plates on all these bacteria so that we can sell them, saying this is my strain and I can guarantee it gets through the stomach. And it's like, I don't know if that was supposed to do there. And I don't know if, we were ever supposed to have that in 1 billion. And it's nice that you put the numbers 58 after it. And I can go look up in these rat studies, but show me again, for me, because the sickest patients sometimes I have are the ones that bring in the suitcases of pills. Right. So it's like, if all these magic beans came in and I'm doing some of my assessments and I'm just talking to the person and I'm like, wow, like you should be Adonis, with the thousands of dollars that you're ingesting in cellulose and nutrients in a day. Like it just doesn't seem to be catching. So
Yeah, I know. I know there's and you got to go now, so I have to go. But I know there's a guy, Dr. Zach Bush, and he has this product Restore, but he's talking about like getting dirt basically back in, like soil extracts back into the gut biome, like, and that was kind of his whole.
There's good things to that, but there's all parts to it, right? And we get into this specialization of like looking at something that we can't even begin to specialize. Like we're saying, all these parts, they change. They change at different seasons. They change even at different times of the day. And then we're going to isolate these parts, which we always hate. It's like what we did in fitness, right? We're just going to focus on the tricep, and we're just going to focus on this head of this. And I'm like, wow. Like, and then it comes back and it's like, oh, that didn't really do shit. So now we got to go ahead and work the whole arm and the muscle, and the tricep gets stronger when it's supported by its buddy.
Yeah, like I can completely resonate with what you're saying, because that's exactly how I see things in terms of rhythms and biological rhythms. Because like even like just like it just makes sense to me, like seasonality, light cycles, like even within like an actual 24-hour period, we've got cycles like with body temperature. So again, if we're constantly just supplying the body with a very consistent stimulus, it's obviously going to diminish over a period of time, and again we're going to get adaptive resistance. And so I can completely resonate with this like idea that there's rhythms and there should be deload periods and there needs to be variation.
I think the hardest thing for people to understand is that you're not trying to find the metrics to that rhythm. That rhythm is just supposed to be part of a parasympathetic nervous system that just happened. Because here's the other thing then we start doing. We start tracking temperature. We start looking at our peak. We start doing all these things, trying to force these periods of hours of the day where our watch goes off and says, time to train your nervous system. It's like, holy shit. Like, when did we just back up and realize there's some laws of nature and these things just happen if we get out of the way? That's always, James and I just had a conversation and just like, you can't force a reflex. When you go into the doctor's office and they're trying to get your reflex, they have to distract you to get the reflex. And a lot of those systems, like the circadian rhythm and things, they're built on reflexes that don't go if the sympathetic nervous system is in front of them, because it says it's not safe. So, when we're doing these intermittent fasting, we're doing all these things, we just have to realize, like, just relax, smile, have a little bit of fun, move, eat, and like, let the processes happen.
Yeah, but because of this lack of variability, though, Jeff, like, do you think that our ability to take on more, our lack of it, like the fact that we have a lack of variation, that our adaptability is shrinking as a species? So like, our ability to handle disruptions of homeostasis, they're not as robust as they would have been generations ago. And this leads to a lot of things like chronic issues with digestive issues and immune issues. So basically, like, our ability to handle like these allostatic loads is diminishing, and our ability to withstand homeostatic disruption is decreasing. So we have a lack of variability, and therefore, if we have a lack of variability, we have a lack of adaptation.
Well, we have no variability.
Adaptability.
We'll say that, that variability means in the absence of stimulants. There's supposed to be stimulus and there's supposed to be, an absence of stimulus. And I think the variability part of it, which is really hard in the tech world, because, again, when we're doing readables and wearables and doing all this stuff, we're saying, variability doesn't exist in the nervous system anymore because there's constant stimulus. And devices have become one of the biggest problems that we have, right? Everybody's engaged. And of course, the devices understand that the more engaged they get your nervous system, the more you're on them. And that's just a study of it. And it's impossible for us now to believe that a nervous system can ever be quiet and restful, because the subconscious is plagued by so many dog whistles just with wireless, right? Wireless is like a dog whistle for your nervous system. You can't see it, but we know that radiation and those frequencies are impacting a nervous system that is supposed to be cycling on like 10 hertz. And so what do we do about that, right? We're not panicking about it. We're just saying, like, we have to figure out in these upcoming years how we're going to recreate this variability and recreate these rhythms, because we've man-made it. It's all man-made. Like, we just have to understand that, right? We always are like, oh, the environment is changing. No. We made all these problems. like the body actually functions pretty well if we get out of its way, and it still can happen in modern civilization. It's just the constant stimulus and the lack of variability leads to a body just kind of spending all its resources and being caught in a very small spot. And it doesn't learn. It doesn't, it basically doesn't have that ability to regenerate. And so it's finite. And we're going to see that in droves in the next little while.
Yeah, that sums it up nicely for me. This constant stimulus and lack of variability, that's just leading to serious issues. I think another phrase that comes to my mind is there's no free lunch in physiology. So my takeaway from this is that variation is key. Respect for biological rhythms is key, and there's no free lunches when it comes to physiology.
Everything else, supplements and everything else, if you don't have that base, you will struggle. And the whole goal is you're not supposed to get the whole base, but you've got to create ways that you get that base back where you're going to build off this base. And if you don't have those bases and you don't have that ability to measure it or to understand that you've overshot on some of those systems, it's really hard to build performance on it, and it's really hard to build longevity on it.
So Doc, where can people find out more about you if they want to connect with you?
My website is thebiomedscenter.com, and the Rhode Island one is thebiomedcenterNE.com, but the easiest way is just to go to Instagram. I guess that's what everybody's doing these days. So it's Dr. Drobot. You can ask me a million questions on there. It's probably just because it's quick and I'm traveling. That's where we can probably have the best dialogue. And I encourage everybody to ask questions, and I'll give you video answers, and we'll just keep pushing the conversation down the hill.
Doc, listen, I really appreciate your time. I know you're a man with high demands. Well, I say I know, but I really don't. You could be just blagging. You could just... I
have no pants on, and I'm ready to go back to bed. No.
Exactly. Yeah, that's just a fake office you're in there. So it's like with James...
Green screens and backdrops here. And the people knocking on the door are my kids, and I'm like, you have to come in at 9 o'clock and knock on the door so I feel like I'm important. So that I'm like, hey, get the cane out and pull me off the stage. No. I appreciate the time. I look forward to doing it in the future.
Yeah. I can remember with James on a podcast that his bookshelf was in the background, and the guys that were interviewing were saying, that's fake. That's a green screen.
Yeah, we don't do anything. Yeah. We're just kind of sitting there with our mock screens out.
All right. So listen, everything will be in the show notes for all the listeners, and for everyone listening, what a great, over an hour jam-packed full of information from the doc. So I really, really appreciate it. So for everyone listening, peace.